Sometimes they're not fun or easy, but you have to have them. And that makes you a stronger team. When you get to that point where you can do it without apologizing, Mike, I'm so sorry, I got to talk to you about this, but I need to let you know this drives me nuts, right? And you have that. I think that's awesome. We're almost to the end, so just bear with me, but I want you to know I've been skipping through other slides because I'm really trying to keep us on time tonight, but your participation has been amazing. So I hope you have seen how I'm pacing us to make sure I'm not cutting you off and making sure that your conversation is helpful to you, that you're learning. What I want to go to right now is, these are all things that have happened in districts in Oklahoma. So your task right now, we're just going to do it as a large group, okay? Your task is to look at each of these items and to just say out loud, is it a board responsibility or superintendent? And Mike, you probably understand when it says superintendent, doesn't mean maybe everything you personally, but you are delegating, okay? All right, so who adopts district policies? Okay. Inspect property and make recommendations?
Superintendent.
Okay. Approve the calendar?
Board.
Hire principals?
Superintendent.
Okay, I tricked you. I forgot to tell you, didn't I? Poll directions. There might be a few tricky ones in here. He recommends to you.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, I think that's just right.
It's okay. I love doing that to board members. It just cracks me up. But you are not involved in the interviews, I hope. Okay. There are many districts in Oklahoma where boards do the interviewing of the principals along with the superintendent. And the accreditation statute says you're not to be involved in the day-to-day business of the school district. Interviewing people is part of the day-to-day. So when I get to this one, yeah, it leads to long conversations, but not with you, thank you. Adopt district budget. Provide direction for the district. Yeah, because you're a team, right? You work on it together. So when you talk about district goals, you're going to do that together. Approve teacher contracts. All right, do your teachers negotiate?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know how that goes. Decide what type of weed killer to use.
Oh, it's definitely our job. That's Cody. Cody does that.
See, even they know I delegate that.
When this came from my district, and I would meet with every board member every month prior to the board meeting, and I had a micromanaging board member, true sweetheart, but every month he had his AM list. But I said, just have your AM list. You're meeting with me, you get all my time. And so he would have questions about the packet, and then he'd go, but now I need to talk to you about the really important stuff. And this one was on there every month.
You gotta be careful what type of weed killer to use?
Well, he had a special brand, but I can't remember. And I said, you have to understand, for all these years, my husband's done the cooking, grocery shopping, I do the yard and the cleaning and the pool. I'm all about our school yards. And yes, it drives me nuts to see crabgrass, but our maintenance director has a plan for maintaining all the yards that OSU created, and we're following that plan. It's just taking a while for the weeds to die. But every month, that was on there.
Unbelievable.
Until he finally went off the board. So see,
It was a good thing.
no, he truly was a sweetheart, but he was all hung up about weeds. And that was his, like Travis's, his curriculum. That is something you should be hung up on.
That's right. That's important. Not
Okay.
weeds.
Right. Check the roofs for leaks.
Like, you can do that.
There was
Cody.
a large 6A school district where, in Oklahoma, these are all Oklahoma, that one board member got mad because he kept getting all these calls from teachers about having to put buckets in their classrooms because of the roof leaks. So one July, he decided to walk every roof in the district. There were multiple facilities. What do you think happens when you walk on a tar and paper roof in Oklahoma in July?
Did you pass out and fall off the
Did you
roof?
ruin some shoes?
Well, there was the whole safety thing because a lot of the buildings were multi-story. But the other thing was he then caused such huge leaks. The district
That's right.
had to use bond money to replace roofs, not just fix them. And then the kicker was they had to go to their patrons to vote a supplemental bond because they had now spent money they hadn't planned on spending to fix the holes in the roofs. Not good. Assign personnel.
So I would think, the first thing I would think of is, are we liability of him being
Yes.
on that roof? What if he falls? And, you know, sues the school, are we?
And that's what the superintendent told him, and that's also what Julie Miller told him. Assign personnel.
Superintendent.
You know, and you can see, guys, you can see how some boards would get in the weeds on some of these, right? Okay. Approve construction, you should know this really well. Act as final appeal for students and staff. Create curriculum. Wait a minute, don't answer. Travis, who does that?
Good answer.
Okay, good job. Handle parent complaints.
Super.
You funnel them to him.
Mhm.
You listen, but you don't handle them.
Mhm.
There you go. Look at Tina. Do it again, Tina. Nice. She's funneling. Work with the legislature.
Everybody should.
Yeah.
And actually, I should have a third column, community. It should be everybody. All of your staff, all of your patrons, not just all of you, because it's gotten to that point. It takes everybody talking to them. Evaluate staff, including coaches. You know,
Well, we probably all do that, but we're not supposed to.
but you don't.
But not on paper.
Okay. Team, okay. Direct purchases. Do you tell Mike and his staff what to buy?
No.
Exactly. Okay. Schedule an athletic event. Yes, there are board members that try to do this.
No. No.
Correct. Dismiss tenured employees.
Well, we might have the final approval, but he recommends.
Very good. He recommends, but you're the one that actually does it. Work to resolve staff complaints. Okay, very good, guys. We're going to skip that one. The last thing I just want to say is I want you to think about sometime in the future having a board retreat with your superintendent. Just like tonight's a special board meeting, so you had to post an agenda, you had to file it with the county clerk, right? You could do a retreat as a special board meeting, and at that time you could talk about, maybe you want to know more about finance, because the majority of you have not been on the board a long time. So maybe you want to bring Sean Heim in, or Vernon Florence, or Mike does a session on how schools are funded and explain the two parts of a school funding formula to you. Or maybe you want to go in-depth on curriculum. Maybe you have a curriculum initiative that you're getting ready to start, or something that's been going on that maybe you want more information. That would be a good time to do it. We always use it as a time to set district goals and to talk about my evaluation for the next year, about what the board wanted to see. So working on district goals, because you could do a half day, you could do an all day.
What do other boards do? I mean,
As
we've
far
never
as-
done one. Obviously, I've not been on here only 3 years, but have you ever done one since you've been here?
A retreat.
I mean, so,
Yeah, we did.
I see you say, I heard you say day or weekend or,
It's whatever you want, if you choose to do that. It's just, we did it as a full day and did it away from the administration building. So we would get the conference room at Karsten Creek, and because it's away. And so I wouldn't be bothered. And it was a nice setting. So it's not at someone's, it's not at a bank office boardroom where, you know, if one of you worked at a bank and then you're going to get bothered. It was just a different setting, so you behave differently when the view changes. But it was a good time. We usually would spend half of the day just working on where are we on our district goals and where do we want to go next? Do we need to tweak these goals? It was just a good time to talk about. And then my cabinet and I would give the board an update on how the year went. Things that we can't say in an open meeting. Now, it is an open meeting, and the media would show up, but after they saw that it's an all-day meeting, they'd stay like for an hour, and then they'd head out. But it is an open meeting, but it was a good time for us to just have them, because you can't do that kind of in-depth conversation like Gina was talking about. You can't have that when you're on the stage, because you're conscious of, it's our monthly meeting, we need to bam, 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 right? And so you sit there wanting to know more or go in depth, but you're thinking, that doesn't really pertain to this agenda item, and I just need to wait. So there might be things you want to know more about that you could do at a retreat. I
We
don't
did
know.
those my first 2 years, and,
Here?
yes.
Okay.
And it's basically like a committee meeting, but with the whole board.
And what did you do?
I'm sorry.
What did you do at it?
Honestly, the first year is a blur, but should have been probably anyway. The second year was.
That's honest.
The second year was really when we set the stage for the long-range plan, the transition to neighborhood schools from grade centers, and really formulated the next steps for the bond issue.
See, that's a perfect thing to do.
And it was.
Where did you do that?
We went to Meridian, and
They have great facilities.
and we've got some places here that we can do that too.
Yeah.
But it was really an opportunity where, I mean, Carmen gave an outstanding presentation over the rationale to transition to neighborhood schools, and we had in-depth discussion about it. I didn't change Danae's opinion, but.
Yeah, we did it. There you go.
Now we know the topic. I didn't tell you I was going to ask her during the break. Now we know, Gina.
But you never know, we changed her view on a school in southern Logan County,
Yes.
so you never know.
But
The
that
majority rules, I believe that.
really it allowed us to have some frank discussion about some of those things. And also, I guess it's that first year's kind of coming back to me a little bit as I'm talking, because I use that as an opportunity to get to know the board better, so that I can understand what their expectations were of me.
Well, and for them to get to know each other.
And
Because it's really hard for you all to really get to know each other when you're not in a meeting, because people's perception, if they see several of you gathered, oh, they must be talking about school business. When actually, they could be talking about what Travis's boys are up to, right? And unless they're hovering by you, they don't hear that conversation that he's talking about his son's pranks they're doing, but they think they must be talking school. So, you know, I just throw that out there so
Well,
that
it sounds
you
like to me
all.
that it would be a good idea, because it's some of the things that we have talked about that we struggle with as a board, you know, setting goals and things like that. Those are the things we've been struggling with, because that takes time and discussion and such as that, and it doesn't get done.
We have to agree that we're all going to take the time to do it
Absolutely.
and not
Right,
think we need to leave.
right.
And that's one of the things, I mean, we did it during the day. We finished by 3. We started, I think, around 8:30 or 9, so it was a full day. Took a little bit of time at lunch, and then we were back at it. And
It's a long day.
yeah, but it was very productive.
It was pretty good. Yeah, it was.
So, you know, I'm just throwing that out there for you all to think about, and Mike can think about it with his team, and you all have a conversation in the future if that's something that would work for you. I just like to put these bugs out there for you all to process, to make you
It's time for
stronger and
another
better.
one.
So, before I let you have your 4-minute drink and drain break, just look at these little sayings up here. So I'm known for sayings. Think about this. The mother porcupine views her offspring as smooth.
We're all perfect, yeah.
The best children are not waiting at home hidden. Every parent and guardian is sending you their best. And they all think their children rock this world, right?
Right.
And that's why we're here for all kids. Okay? A little passionate about that. Now this one, I had a friend in Stillwater tell me this one time when I had someone getting in my business. And this friend said, Ann, you just need to think about this. Never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, but only the pig enjoys it, right? So that's why my struggle was social media, because I would want to jump in and respond, and I couldn't, so I delegated that to my assistant Sue. Because if I did, then I was going to look like this dirty pig. Time is your friend. Very rarely as a board, and Gina, you've probably figured this out, very rarely as a board do you have to make a decision quickly. So sometimes there may be an agenda item that, you know, and then maybe this is how you surprise Mike. He thinks that this agenda item is ready to be voted on, and let's just say then Janae says, you know, I want to table this, Madam President, till next month. We need more time, more information. Not time sensitive, you need more time, it's okay. Now, setting the date for the bond election is time sensitive, right? That's a little different. And then the last one comes from the movie Frozen. Sometimes you just gotta let it go.
Let it go.
Janae?
Let it do that. I can't do it.
All right, 4-minute drink and drain, be back, ready to talk about SuperVal. So now in your packet, you have the handout of the new superintendent evaluation, so if you'll get that out. And what we're gonna do is just go through each page. And right now, this is an Excel document, so this workbook, and so each of these headings, each of these pages is a tab in that. So after tonight and any changes we need to make, then I'll clean it up, I'll send it to Mike tomorrow, and then he or Jana, however you all work that out, will email it to all of you. I want to remind you that what we were talking about a year ago in the board meeting, this is a different way of evaluating your superintendent. So in the past, you have done what I call one and done, where once a year you, as a group, share with him an executive session. Where does he do well? Where do you hope he can improve? And then you hope he can, you know, we're going to try again next year, right? So I created 3 years ago when I first went to the association based on a session I went to at NSBA, and it was a Wyoming superintendent and his board president. And they would do an ongoing evaluation. So they actually had 14 tabs, and each month they would look at one piece of the job, sometimes two, in executive session. And he said it took no more than 5 or 10 minutes. And he didn't show us what his model looked like, but he said it's no more than 3 to 5 items pertaining to that one topic, such as curriculum, okay? And he said, and then if I got a low score, the board would give me suggestions in that executive meeting for me to work on for the rest of the year to improve in that area. So let's say that Mike is weak in finance, which we know he's not. That's a really good strength of his, is finance. And so when I know that you all are probably going to do the chunking version of this, so every quarter you'll look at several pieces at one time instead of doing one piece a month. The beauty of this is to try to make it as objective as we can and not opinionated. Mike and Jennifer and Jana will come up with a schedule of when you're going to look at these items in executive session. And Jana, you will not put on the board agenda which specific topics. I can send you the wording tomorrow when I send this cleaned up copy. For your packet, it'll just say, go into executive session to discuss the ongoing evaluation of our superintendent per statute 70. Yada, yada, yada. Because that way, if there's something you want to bring back up, like a lot of new superintendents that are being hired now have trouble with finance, because that's not something they're getting a lot of training in. So when they're doing this evaluation, they'll maybe look at finance in December, okay? Because here's, you approve your budget in October, so then the next chunk, finance is going to be one of those 2 or 3 tabs you look at, because number one, you have seen documentation in that area in your board packet recently. So he's not having to create a lot of new information for you that you then have to turn around and read. You have that information in your packet. If there was a piece of information related to finance that you needed that you never saw in your packet, then you would let him know prior to the December meeting. Does that make sense? Okay, so then you come in December. Mike's going to do a self-eval on finance, and let's say another item that you might do in December, it might be student achievement. Okay, so it might be the curriculum piece, because hopefully by then you will have received your test scores. Because remember, it was November this year when we got them. Okay, but next year it should be earlier because they won't be doing cut scores. Pollyanna, Annie over here, I'm thinking surely they can get it earlier. Okay, so you do those two. So he does a self-eval on finance and student achievement, sends it out to the whole board for you to see, so that when you look at these 2 sheets, you see how Mike perceives himself, okay? You already have seen in your board packet all the information on student achievement because maybe she brings it to you at the November board meeting. So you've seen budget in October, you see student achievement in November, so in December you go into executive session to evaluate him on these two areas. So before you come, you look at his self-eval, you look at your 2 sheets on this, and then it's up to you however you do it. Some boards are scoring it at home and coming into executive session ready. Other boards are saying, well, I really don't want to score until I come into executive session and I hear what everyone has to say. So some boards never write anything down. They just have a conversation, and then the clerk, who's clerk in here? Okay, so Janae then would, on one of the copies, you would be actually keeping the actual score. At the end of the night, you give those 2 sheets with the final score to Mike, because we sure don't want this finished document being emailed. Obvious reasons, right? People can hack. And then you can be the keeper of your evaluation. So let's say on finance that something happens to Mike and he no longer handles finance well. So in your executive session, and you decide the overall score for finance is a 1. So this is a 4-point, it's not 5. What we have found when teachers are evaluated or administrators, if you do a 5-point, where do you think people land?
3.
Right? Either really good or really bad. 3 is safe. So this is a 4-point. So a 1 is unacceptable. And that's when you offer suggestions for growth. A 2 is a minimum. That is what you expect. It's like satisfactory, okay? A 3 is above average, meaning he is doing this most of the time. It is above average, it is amazing, but it's not rock star status, I call it, 24/7, okay? And then a 4 is the rock star status. This is considered a growth model. So just like with teachers and principals, and that's what I loved about this. This is how we evaluate everyone else. And my question was, if we do that for teachers and principals, why can't we do it for superintendents? So that's kind of how all this came about. It is meant to be more objective, less opinionated. It is ongoing so that you're collaborating with him, you're coaching him. Let's say though that, back to the tanking and finance, and y'all are sitting here and you look at me and go, well, I don't know how to give you suggestions, I just know that things need to be a lot better. Then Mike says, well, you know, let me think about it and come up with some suggestions, and I'll share those with you next month in executive session. So it might be that he schedules a time with Sean Hine, because Sean got his doctorate last year from OU. His dissertation was on school finance. Yeah, that's sick. So he does a lot of work with some of our superintendents that are struggling right now in the area of finance. They'll bring their budgets in, he'll talk to them about how funding works, he'll help them understand how their budgets work. There are some boards when they, he gives you those suggestions of what he wants to do, and then at the end of the year, which because he's on a multi-year contract, the final time to talk about this would be June. Because then the new year, and this is what we encourage districts when they have a SUP on a multi-year, make your evaluation go July 1 to June 30, okay? The SUPs that are on a 1 year, we're saying stick to what you're already doing. If it's December to December, January to January, because then if things go south, that superintendent still has 1 semester to try to find another job. And you're not trying to do an evaluation in June when they're packing up, okay? All right, so then in June, he would report back to you, hey, in December, we had these 2 suggestions. I was able to do both of them. Here are the results. Now, it might be that things were so bad in finance, you didn't want him to wait till June, then he could still report back to you the next time you do a chunk and say, well, and you all would know, because you would talk about an exec the last time, in addition to doing these 2 topics, Mike's also going to follow up with us and update us on finance. Okay? So when you come into exec, he's in the room now. And this is a major change. I don't know how you currently do it. Is he out of the room and then you call him in? Okay, so this is collaborative. So he is with you and you're having this conversation. So let's just look at the first one, board-soup relationship. And I will tell you, I struggle with this because this is so subjective. There's nothing you're gonna see in a board packet on transparency and his relationship with you and how he communicates with you, how involved you are in policy, and then earning your points that you have to earn, right? I just struggle. How do you make this be objective? It's everyone's perception on your relationship with your superintendent, okay? So, let's say transparency, okay? And Travis, I'm gonna pick on you for a while, okay? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you, sweetie, I appreciate it. So transparency, you decide you wanna come with your sheet filled out, okay? And you just kind of go around the table, and they're calling out numbers. Well, the majority of the 7 have 2s and 3s. Jennifer has a 4, Travis has a 1. Because Travis's perception is, since I'm no longer board president, Mike is not being as open with me about everything, and I am sure, and you know I'm exaggerating, but you get where I'm going, right? I am sure there are things going on that he is not telling me, okay? So at that time, the 2s and the 3s, my point in this is everybody doesn't have to talk every time about every line item, okay? And that's where boards are struggling when they first start. Everybody wants to talk about every single item. So the 1 and the 4 would be the ones to have a conversation. Does that mean Jennifer has to get Travis to change his mind or vice versa? No, but it's just for purposes of information. And then, Janae, your task then, I have a formula built in on the end of the column going vertically to compute. I don't have formulas on each line. So then you're just gonna, on scratch paper, in your head, whatever, you're gonna average all these scores to come up with one average to put in each box that then averages with the formula at the bottom. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've got a question too. So when I was board
Okay.
president a few years ago, I called our lawyer. I had some questions on the evaluation because we scored it going through 5. And he advised me, I thought this was a bit of a stretch at this point. But he said actually, we were in executive session and we were kind of taking it well and what we thought the number should be. And that could be construed as a public executive session. So he advised me just to record on the document all the individual schools. So the superintendent could see it wasn't an average. Of course, Mike in this, now Mike would be part of the process, so he would know anyway, right? Whereas before he was not in.
No, I didn't.
So, I mean, is there any concern about, so you're saying average these numbers? And I was advised against doing that instead of just.
But you're not taking a vote. You're doing the same thing.
Well, he
You're
was saying
just
it could be
doing,
construed.
well, but you're doing it out loud versus writing it down and coming up with an average, right?
I don't have a problem
Divided by
with the way it's
7, and that's your
suggested.
average.
Yeah, the lawyers have blessed it. And in fact, 2 large 6A districts ran this tool past their legal team after they adopted it, and both of them blessed it.
No, like I said, I thought it was a bit of a stretch
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah, was it RFR?
Yeah, it's lawyer.
Moyer said that? Huh. Because Moyer blessed this for Tulsa Public.
It wasn't about the.
No, yeah.
Oh,
It was
okay.
No, it was
about-
the other one.
It was about the board coming to a consensus of what the numbers should be.
So he's very conservative, so he probably took that to think of a
So he had
vote.
advised me to, instead of doing that, just recording each individual school.
And that's what your clerk is
I'm
going to
gonna
do.
do that and then divide them by 7 and get an average.
Right.
Add 'em up.
So it's a bit.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't know how John would feel about that, but I think if I'm in the room, it changes.
I do too.
Yeah.
And I think too, having that conversation together, number one, the thing that I feel strongly about with this kind of tool, every voice is heard. So I don't know how it's happened before, but sometimes you have strong personalities that overpower maybe quieter voices, and not every voice is heard. So by having you go around the room and everybody say what score you have for transparency, right? Every voice is heard. And then having you two have a conversation because you're the outliers, then maybe broadens the perspective of others that maybe there are things they haven't thought about, right? and leads to a conversation of, well, down here on the box on the bottom, we can sure write some strings. I call them warm fuzzies. You can write strings, and then you can also think about, well, gosh, there still seems to be a transparency issue, so maybe you think of some suggestions to do. Like, Travis, why don't you meet with Mike on a regular basis, or when you feel like there might, because you haven't heard from him for a while, so maybe there's something you need to put away, right? Reach out versus waiting. I mean, I just think it's back to that communication thing, that conversation thing. Okay, so relationship, I think that's really clear. Communication, we've talked about that a lot tonight. Policy involvement. Now this was interesting, especially with all the conversation we've had tonight about that. Do you subscribe with Julie Miller to do your policy?
No, RFR.
No? RFR does your policy? Okay, so it's still the same thing though. You've got someone outside looking at your policies and bringing to the board. Does RFR decide which ones to bring to you? Do you decide which ones to look at?
Generally, especially after the legislative session, I take their list and I go through to see, because sometimes the way our policies are, it may not pertain, because we may have taken a different route way back when on the policy. But if I see something that I know needs to be changed, we try to do that in the summer months in advance of the school year.
Right.
And definitely by those November 1 laws that go into effect as well. And then any kind of modification of policy that I see, we kind of vet that in committee. And if a board member comes to me wanting to have a discussion about policy, then we have that. And that usually starts at the committee level and then escalates to the board level. And when that happens, I'll approach RFR for 1 or 2 or however many versions that we might have to begin formulation of it. And that's pretty much a whole board decision once we get there.
That's awesome. So see, the cool thing, what he was telling you, when you look at policy involvement, so look at that line. If you had to score him right now based on what you know and what you heard him say, what score would you give him? Because?
He's taking the initiative, or lead in determining those.
Right.
Probably should.
Right. He's taking the initiative, he's taking lead, he's not having to be prodded by anybody. You don't have a board committee for policy, right? Right. So he is handling it, and he's, like Travis said, he's taking the initiative, okay? And I'll just say that's kind of rare. A lot of superintendents do not take the initiative. In fact, some of them just kind of ignore policy. But the responsibility of him, if you think back to your responsibilities as a board member, is to approve policy and then hold him accountable, right? For meeting board policy. Yeah. Okay, and then the last one, board development. So you probably know, but Gina may not know, that by law, the superintendent is responsible for notifying you twice a year in the board agenda of all 7 board members, your term and your points, and what you still need to get. So this one, some boards have kept this line in and some have taken it out. That I had a board last week say, you know what, it's not our superintendent's job. She doesn't need to be telling us about future trainings. OSSBA, you guys mail us, you email us all the time. I said, yeah, almost daily. And we are adults. We should pay attention to what opportunities we want to take advantage of to get our points. And so that board said, we want that out. So they took this line out. And that is the one line on this whole page. It wasn't transparency, relationship, communication, nothing. That one line is what boards are choosing to keep or take out. So I just throw that out there for your conversation, what you want. If you want to keep it, take it out, it's up to you. And you can take any of these out. The law for evaluating your superintendent just says evaluate a minimum of once a year. It doesn't say what tool. That's why when I was sharing this with one district, the principals were in the room, and they came up afterwards and they said, we sure like that a lot better than the one we're using, which is mandated by law. Can you create one for principals? And I said, no, because yours is governed by law. Superintendent's is not. It just says do it. So, you can keep all of those, take some out, tell me what you all wish.
Well, I mean, looking at the one you said on the board development, I don't think it's necessary for him to actively, continually hound us about getting our points. The number 3 in there, to me, is what he should be doing. I mean, and that's what he does. I mean, he lets us know that it's available, and it's our job to determine whether or not we're gonna do it or not. So I don't know if it
It's
needs
up
to
to
stay
you.
in there or not, or.
It's your pleasure.
So we are updated twice a year of where our points are.
Well, actually, you can go online anytime on the OSSBA portal and see all your
That's what I'm trying to
points.
say.
And you being a new board member, you have to have so many points within the first 15 months. And so you can go online and check them, but by law, you have to have seen it in your board packet twice a year of where you are.
Yeah.
What do you mean in the board packet?
It's an agenda item, information only, that
That's a little
says,
different than what Julie said.
We just usually get a sheet of paper that tells our points.
And what I do is refer to it in the superintendent's report you have in front of you.
I think there might be a statute on that. I'll find out and let
Okay,
you
'cause
know.
the way Julie explained that, she wanted it to be included in the minutes, not necessarily the agenda. And so,
I'll check.
at least that's what I heard.
Okay,
I
I'll
can't
check.
promise you that's what she said, that's what I heard.
Well, she told me in Stillwater that it had to be an agenda item, so it was always an actual agenda item. I'll find out.
Yeah, because she was very, very descriptive of having that in the minutes that we could refer back to, that it was discussed. And so that's why I put it in my superintendent's report. In front of you, you have your updated,
And so it was
Out.
individualized sheet in front of each board seat?
Right.
yeah.
Oh,
I keep a spreadsheet for each one of them,
Yeah.
as far as how many points they have, what they have, how many they need, by what day, et cetera. So I just print that off.
And I chose to do it that way rather than calling out each individual,
Yeah, you don't want to do
because I felt like it was a lot more professional to do it that way to communicate.
that. Totally agree.
Shame on the front of it.
You need points, Travis?
No, I did about a year ago.
Oh, okay.
Me too. And I got reminded.
I'll clarify.
Okay.
But I
And I'm
think
glad.
maybe her interpretation is a kinder, gentler one.
And I wonder if maybe her interpretation has changed, because that's been
It's been a while.
probably 3 years ago that she and I had that conversation.
Okay. And so it would have been while I was still superintendent, so it would have been at least 4.
So if it was an agenda item, would you have to talk about each person, or just saying?
Before you see
Okay.
in the packet the points.
We'll take
Yeah.
care of that. Let's
Okay.
not, I didn't want to
Okay.
get us off the weeds there.
Oh, no, it's all good. So do you want to keep
If
that
we left that
item?
in there, how do you do things different with her being? I mean, I don't need, like Janae said, I don't need you to worry about,
Right.
I want to score a 4 on this, I'm going to hound Travis about going.
So that's exactly what that is what he had to be doing to get a 4.
Yeah, I don't need, I'm really not concerned.
I like just the
I
3.
really don't need you to worry about
Yeah.
that. But I mean, at the same time, I appreciate the emails from Jana saying, hey,
Mhm.
these are the opportunities.
Oh, yeah.
And know that when she sends those emails, that's a discussion that she and I have.
And it's,
So that I'm.
this one, last one was really nice.
And Jana will probably continue to do that because the law says he's responsible, but usually Soup's delegated to their administrative assistant board clerk. So he's going to continue doing that. The question is, do you want to evaluate him on that? So it doesn't sound like you all want that
No,
item in the
we don't need to.
evaluation. Okay, it's gone. Okay,
That's, yeah.
all right, go to the next tab.
May I
I'm
ask
sorry.
a question?
Sure.
If it's not in our agenda, what tab we are going to be looking at that month, how do we know what tab we're looking at?
Okay, so Jana and Mike and Jennifer are going to create the schedule
Okay.
for their
So we
10.
have an annual schedule
Yes.
of what tabs we're looking at.
There are 10 tabs, and so they will put together that schedule because Jana, as the clerk, knows what items appear on the agenda every November.
Perfect.
She has a tickler file, probably a system for keeping track. She knows every January this item's going on the agenda. So because she knows when documentation's gonna appear, she can help create that
As
schedule.
long as we know when it has to.
You'll get it. And then, you know what, it might be in November, then someone says, I don't know if it's Mike or Jennifer as president, or whoever says, okay, remember, next month we're doing his evaluation, and we're gonna be talking about this tab and this tab.
What if you know you're gonna be absent? Can you send your tab in?
It's up to y'all.
I didn't know how to do
If you know you're gonna be absent, I would encourage you to convey your thoughts and if you want to do the That's just my opinion.
Yeah. We did that with Gail, we took hers, even though she wasn't gonna be at that meeting, because she'd been there the whole year before, I mean, the whole time before, so we, you know, had her do hers.
I think it's fine to go ahead and come in, but I think if you're going to score negatively,
Yeah, then you
you
need
should
it.
not be accepted unless you're there in person.
Yeah.
Provide efforts or support,
That's a good point.
because that's the whole purpose of having this process.
Right.
Yeah,
To have Mike in there, we as a board can flesh these things out.
right, because he needs to know exactly why.
I'm gonna score negative, and then I'm not gonna show up on the stuff.
Because we know you're gonna
You said it, we didn't.
be. Good job, Tina. Okay. Community relationship. Community, so engagement of families and community. He's not going to have documentation in board packet on that. But you know, because you see how involved he is in the community, right? You've mentioned that earlier. I can't remember if it was Janae or Sharon. Someone said he's far exceeded what we expected, right, on visibility in the community. Communication, and this is not communication with you, this is communication with the community, okay? And then media, some people, and I know there are a lot of districts where they don't have involvement from the media, but I think Guthrie does.
Yes.
Okay.
Section on
Uh-huh.
the news for us.
They do.
And then,
Now to all new media.
there you go. And then some people are changing this to say media/social media, the involvement of the SUP in social media, and you might want to think about adding that right now because he is highly engaged in social media. Would you like to do that?
Probably should.
I would say
Okay.
yes.
We're gonna be obsolete if we don't.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, that's fine, I don't want Mike to think he has.
No, I don't want
Spend a lot
him
of
to think
time on
he has,
social
I don't want to grade him on how
No,
he deals
that-
with, I just say media is good enough.
I mean,
That's
it's
my
just
opinion.
how
Except
we
if
deal
it's
with
monitor
it,
is
with
on.
no comment, or, you know.
Well, the social media thing, I accepted in my first year that
That was-
the most operative
Yeah.
method of communication with the community to get information out there in this community is social media, because we have a newspaper without a huge readership. And they have even pared back one of their editions since I've been here. So they're only, what, 2 days a week now? And then with Guthrie News Page, the online newspaper, that is more prevalent, but the most instant is social media. Which is why when we have a bus wreck, that's what gets on social media. I post that from the site.
Yeah.
And that's a positive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then visibility, he's not, I just want to caution you on this. I hope you don't then ask him to bring you a calendar of everything he's done for the quarter, being visible. I had to have a chat with 2 boards about that because the SUPs were calling, going, do you know what they're doing now? I went, oh, surely not. And so you know, because you're out and about, or you hear from people, right, that you see him at blah, 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 blah. And you hear him in his SUP report say, you know, it's been a busy quarter this month, this month I've been to all these speaking engagements and nighttime events, you know all that.
It's all over social media.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whether it shows up or not, they let us know.
All right, are we good with community relations?
Yeah.
And then go to staff. So internal communications, you know what that means, right? You're not gonna ask him for, because you're not gonna see this in board packet. You're not gonna ask him to save all of the emails he sends to his employees. It might be if there's a really sensitive one that he's sending out to notify You know, like I'm sure when you lost your two precious teachers, probably had to send something district-wide.
Generally, if I send a district-wide email, I
Are you-
also CC them.
Okay, perfect. So you're seeing examples of what he's doing, right? And you're hearing probably from employees, well, we heard from Dr. Simpson,
Right.
right, about the construction update or whatever. Okay.
There's like a quarterly meeting with the teachers also.
Yeah, and that has, we have an internal communications committee.
Oh, cool.
But, and when we get the minutes of those meetings, we send that out. But this is kind of news for you guys as well. We've had meetings, we've had no issues brought to us. They have been handling those because we established internal communications committees at the building level. Those issues have remained at the building level, and we've
Nice.
had no internal communications issues up to this point during the school year.
That's
that have come
awesome.
to the district level.
Awesome.
Others could learn from us. I'm telling you.
I
We-
think
we got it
that's
going on
awesome.
here.
Okay, so personnel matters. Do you have an HR person?
Struggle.
Look at that smile.
Okay, so you're going to evaluate Mike on, does he, along with Doug, do they follow your policies on personnel matters? Do they have procedures? A good example would be a superintendent didn't follow his board policy and hired one of his longtime buddies without going through interview process, without going through background check, nothing. It was just, Travis is my friend, so I'm gonna hire him for this job. Okay, that's what all of this means. So do they follow their policies and procedures? And it's not that Mike is directly involved, but it's how well he supervises him. No pressure. Okay, good.
Well, it's not a negotiated agreement, that we have to open it up for so many days.
Right.
And so I think that's following policies.
Yeah, you're gonna make sure you, yeah.
And unless the board knows, there's very few personnel issues that Doug and I have those discussions in
Yeah.
concert with each other.
Sure you do. Yeah, that's awesome. Delegating, might be something that he shares with you. You know, part of the job of being a superintendent is to grow your people, to help them become more effective leaders. And not that they all want to be a superintendent, but maybe they want to assume more of a leadership role in a building or at a district level, whatever responsibility they might see. But part of that is being able to delegate and not do everything himself. Okay. Culture. How in the world would you document culture? How are you going to know? How are you going to You see my dilemma? Yeah, would you say that when you walk into each of your schools, you can tell, right? Hit you in the face. Or you think about, is there one building that you get a lot of input from staff or parents? You know, you can kind of see a pattern. Kind of gives you a clue about the culture. Yeah, to me, I struggle with this, and yet this impacts,
It's really subjective.
is very subjective, right? But it impacts kids wanting to come to school, staff wanting to come to school. But I struggle with how to make that measurable. And then visibility. I will tell you that this one has been a struggle for a lot of superintendents. Some superintendents have said, I never walk into a classroom and I don't plan on starting. So they take out the word classrooms and just say regular visits to buildings. And then there are others that say, I'm in buildings and classrooms all the time, this is not a big deal. So I don't know if Mike wants to say anything about
It's not a
that.
big deal.
You can refer back to social media because we see it in the classrooms.
Yeah. So for the supporting documentation, we're just gonna pull up Facebook?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. See,
But
Facebook.
no, that's not, and I don't, that's an expectation, and I will say that's been a challenge as the construction has gotten in the way, but, yeah, that's an expectation.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question.
Sure, please do.
On staff relationship,
Uh-huh.
on any of this, how do we know? Because we don't like our language.
Right.
What does the staff really think of him? What do they look up to him? Do they respect him? Or are they just going through the motions to keep their job? I mean, where do you address that at?
That's a good question, Gina. You will know, there are some superintendents who are so ineffective and confrontational that the board members are aware of it. You hear it. You see it in social media. When you're at a ball game or a band concert, you can see that no one is coming up and talking to the superintendent because they're either scared or that superintendent is so alienating, if that's a word, that people want nothing to do with that person. I know Career Tech does a 360. So they send out a quick survey to the businesses that they work with their Career Tech students. And then they also send a piece of the evaluation out to their staff to get a feedback on. But we haven't done that with Common Ed.
So, yeah, so that kind of, if I was going to this slide, but that's my frustration is, they feel like everything's good, the culture's good.
But we want to know what they think.
But how do you measure it? How do you make an actionable item? Say our statistics said, I think we got a problem here, but I can't really quantify it, it's hard for me to point to specifics. I mean, you get, like you said, Common Ed doesn't use surveys. I did one a few years ago, because I felt like it was important, and you see it, we're currently incorporating to local municipality, they all do it, because you learn from it. It's not, you're not really looking to point fingers. How do we know if the culture, maybe not even be Mike's problem, it might be not even be aware of it, maybe it's the building level, is there?
Or like the principal that
The
Gina
principal
alluded
level.
to earlier.
So, I mean, it frustrates me, I know there's some legal issues there because of due process, so we've got to be careful about the information we receive. But at the same time, I wish, I believe there's got to be a way for us to measure, maybe if we just delegate that to Mike so we can put a filter there. Maybe could that be surveys periodically? I don't know, to me, there's got to be a way to measure it, otherwise kind of wasting your time trying to evaluate.
Right,
Because-
because we're up here and they're down here. So this, we don't know.
Mike, what do you think?
One of the things that we have implemented, and we've shared this with, I can't remember if we shared it with the whole board, if it was just one of the committees, but exit interviews. Now, that's not as widespread in the shotgun approach, but we've got an exit survey, and Doug, who did we share that with?
I think we did with all three committees.
Okay.
I think I remember.
Something I suggested, or I asked about
And-
a couple of years ago, you guys, I guess, have been.
It was in the performance review.
Yeah, and so we get that feedback, and that's not as direct about the job I'm doing as much as it is the culture and the climate of the workplace that they're leaving. And we've tried to use that to see if there's any common threads. When Doug gives me the information, I'm looking at it, I'm seeing if there's anything that surprises me. And I don't really recall, it's been a while, but I don't recall anything that stuck out. And we had decent participation, if I remember.
Over 87%.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm looking for any names. I just want
Input.
Yeah, I would like to know how the administrators of each building feel their relationship is,
I'm taking notes because I'm gonna check with legal on getting input, and I will include that when I follow up on board point updates on the packet thing, how that's supposed to work. So, surveys from administrators on their relationship with Mike?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that what we're evaluating him, but we don't know really his relationship with them.
So the UPA survey that we developed a few years ago, each building, it was pretty enlightening, really. Each building had its own survey. I think everybody's kind of looking up at the next administrative executive level. I don't know, you can't, it seemed like you could get a bit of a sense of what the culture was in those buildings. I know we have some guidance from our legal counsel on what we should or should not include.
And there is a legal ruling on this, and for life of me, I can't remember it right now, so that's why I'm being cautious and just putting it on my to-do list for tomorrow. You're really wanting input from administrators, but not all staff? Would that-
All staff. I think it's all staff to get a sense of culture, but I don't know if it's possible for the board to develop a matrix and then, but we don't see. I don't know. It may be.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Travis, I know where you want to go. I gotta figure out how to get there.
Yeah, we can talk about it later.
You know.
Let me get legal information, and Mike, I'll include that in my email to you.
You know, here's what I would say about culture, though, and surveys are good. They provide you input. My take on this is we are the leading employer in Logan County. We have right at 400 employees that work for us. Everyone around this table in some form or fashion is involved in the community. And I think you get a sense of culture from whether or not somebody's rattling your phone on the hook or not, if there is a problem. Now, that doesn't give you the positive, but I think also the thing that I shared about culture, because the culture in our school is going to influence the culture in our community, because we are so big in this community. I said after the filing deadline at the December board meeting, I really do believe the fact that 2 of our board members were up for their seats were up and did not draw an opponent speaks to the culture being, and this is my perception. I have nothing to, I don't have a matrix, but I think that speaks to the perception of culture being smooth, better.
No, I agree. I think our perceptions and instincts are generally correct.
No.
I'm just reluctant to get into this highly effective territory unless I have a way to actually measure.
And that's.
I mean, so.
That's a great question, so let me get more information, and I'll get that to you.
Okay.
Yeah. Great questions, guys. Okay, finance, I think this is pretty black and white and easy to measure. So unless you have questions, we'll go on to the next tab. I think that's it. Okay, teaching, learning, and assessment. So this is the student achievement piece, focusing on students. We talked a lot about that tonight. Professional learning community, so you might have heard of these as PLCs. Do you do that in your schools? You have PLCs. So for evaluating this tab, it's not actually what Mike is doing, but it's his ability to hold his administrators accountable so that at the sites, the focus is on students, that they're implementing PLCs with fidelity, that they're using that time appropriately. Professional development, I mean, he is not directing it for the most part, that's right. So How is he interacting with her to make sure meaningful PD is taking place for your staff? And then the curriculum, once again, it's back on her, and bringing together employees to do an alignment, the vertical alignment, and keeping it current. But it's on him and on his expectation of are these things happening. So when it comes to board packet, it might be that she's giving an update. Maybe you have a couple of teachers come and share sometime during a board meeting to give you an example. What happens in a PLC? I mean, if you were out in the public and someone said, what is a professional learning community? Would you be able to talk about that and give an example? And so that's why it would be good maybe to think about having, you know, a couple of teachers or a couple of principals get up and talk about in a board meeting to give you an example of here's how we're improving student achievement because we're doing this once a month or once a quarter, and talking about that process they go through as a PLC so that you then know what's happening.
Well, and I don't know that we've had a formal presentation, but the principals of our regular update, they talk about the activities that they're engaged in at the campus level, and how the teachers are engaged and what their discussions are and what the goals are. And so I don't know if it's as formal as this,
It's
but
when we present test scores and test results.
Perfect.
Sitting on the curriculum committee, I'll also get a lot more background information on what the PLC look like.
Okay.
So,
And so it might be that maybe when you do your student achievement piece with the update on the test scores from the previous year, that maybe when the principals are sharing, maybe it's a time for them to talk about what PLCs look like in their buildings. Might be. I mean, what my intent here is to make sure that you're in the loop of what's happening in your buildings. Okay, so you decide how you want that information to come back to you in your board meeting. So remember, you don't want Mike and his staff to create a lot of additional materials for you before you evaluate the staff. So think about what are some things that you could hear about in your board meetings that keep you informed of these areas. That's what you want to think about. And when you get to this piece, this to me is really black and white, because these are things that they can get up and share or have additional information just as information only in your board packet, or when the administrators are sharing on their student achievement, they can give you information about, you know, each team at our high school does 4 PLCs a year, and here's how we cover their classes. We even bring in business volunteers to help cover and lengthen the teacher's planning time so that they've got a full 90 minutes or 60 minutes, whatever, to actually be in a PLC without having to hire a sub. Here's what they talk about. Here are the results as a result of being in PLCs. There are ways to make that happen so that you're getting the information in a board meeting, because this is very objective. You know, even, I don't know, does the state require you to submit a professional development plan anymore, or is that gone away?
That went away.
Did it go away? Okay, so it might be that maybe, do the sites create their PD plan, or?
They do. We have a professional development committee, and it oversees that, and there's guidelines for that they follow that are in place that we monitor.
Okay.
And so then those committee members take that district, and they're side members, so we have like some alignment.
Okay, so does the board ever hear about what PD is planned for the year?
Always, always.
How do they hear that?
We go over what we had at camp in the past. We talked about the sessions. We talked about how many attended. This year, with moving to possible neighborhood schools, we talked about it needing to be more site-based so the teachers could collaborate and we could get things ready to talk about what that's going to look like. So
those are agenda items?
In committee.
Yeah, in committee.
Oh, the committee.
Curriculum committee.
The curriculum committee. So then in those minutes that you were talking about, would that PD information be part of the minutes that then the rest of the board would read in their board packet?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And then How would they find out about the ongoing review process, Carmen, for your curriculum? Is that also part of that committee conversation?
Basically, when we go through that, we look at initiatives, we update them on where we are on MAP scores beginning of the year, reading sufficiency, RSA, we look at that. And so, I'm open for anything else that they'd like.
Okay. Anything you want to say about that, Travis?
No, I'm very pleased with the documentation we provide.
Okay.
It's very thorough, it shows where we are in the year, whether it's from off test scores or, yeah, and it's really all the documentation that we said needs to make an objective determination, I think.
Okay.
Sounds like maybe we need to share that with the whole board versus just the curriculum committee, kind of gathering.
If it's not in those minutes that you're doing as a result of the
I mean,
committee.
Carmen, what we're putting in the minutes is not the whole PD plan, though.
It's more of a generic overview, it's not everything.
What you talked about.
Correct.
So if a board member has an interest in what they can ask.
They can ask for more.
I think it's whatever you all decide you want to do for getting information. Do what, Janae?
So I think overall, we get a pretty good view from the curriculum, but when they make their presentations about scores and stuff, they go into a lot of detail about what's going on and how they've gotten there and stuff. They make pretty good presentations to us, I mean, in the board meetings too.
Talking about remediation strategies,
Awesome.
what's going on each site, each principal does.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I will say we changed that a little bit because Doug presented for the secondary and I used to present for the elementary. And we thought, no, those principals need to share that. And so we made that shift because they see the two of us all the time. And then we kind of drizzled it down more to a site level so that those, maybe there's not everything that we know. And so that was a good shift that I think that we made.
I would say that was a really positive thing, because I think we get some great insight from those site principals.
Yes.
On all those things.
They can certainly enrich the detail
Yeah,
of
right.
what's going on in the building better than we
Because they know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, day to day, yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's go on to human resources. So Doug, this is your tab. Okay? So just like Carmen is really responsible, we haven't talked about that, but actually it's good that you have these copies because you're gonna know, I'm sure Mike or Jen will tell you when your tab is gonna be on his evaluation what month, right? And so Doug's gonna make sure that you're recruiting, that you have, do you have an induction process for new people?
We have a in-service for new staff.
Okay, so you do have something in place?
Yes.
Okay.
And the board's actually involved. They actually
For new
attend.
staff, induction process for new staff?
I didn't hear what he said.
We have an in-service day that
Oh.
Dr. Simpson invites you guys to. Some of you guys that can.
For all the new people?
I just didn't hear it.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, then continuous learning. So how are you gonna know that he is expecting administrators, teachers, staff to continuously learn and improve?
Well, don't they do requests to go to these different seminars? I mean, that's one way.
We used to when we had money.
Isn't it part of the evaluation instrument though? So,
For the teachers?
if we know the evaluation is being conducted, then we can consider that.
Well,
How
and
do you differentiate between a 3 and 4 or 2?
well, and it might be too, when Carmen is sharing with you the PD plan, and it sounds like it might be going more site-based, it's easy to see which school has maybe rigorous or forward-thinking PD for all of their people, versus another site might just turn in that their plan for the year is bloodborne pathogens, FERPA, SPED, right? CPR is still a requirement. Those are mandates, those aren't ongoing, pushing me to learn more, right? They're just the minimum, they're the mandates required by law. So you would see information about this one when you look at the PD plan. Plus what you're hearing from your principals. So it might be when the principals are sharing out, they might share out, you know what, we have 3 buildings that went together to do this ongoing PD. So we're gonna get together every other month by grade level across multiple buildings, or at secondary by departments, to do in-basket activities and problem solve and figure out how to grow.
And would like engage, like our principals all go to engage during the summer, that'd be something that Dr. Simpson could use, because they're going, I mean, that's a professional
Oh my
development
gosh,
they go to.
yes. Yeah, that's a great.
That's
idea.
easy to
Yeah.
go over that.
Yeah, yeah, anything. Here is a tricky one, well-being. How do you promote personal, professional health, well-being, and then just for Gina, work-life balance? Right? When she was on mic to ignore an email for the weekend, she wasn't gonna bother him because she wanted to have family time. I mean, I really appreciated that. How are you gonna know? How are you gonna know that Mike expects it and that he is holding Doug accountable to make sure Doug expects it for everybody in this district?
Don't we do a yearly wellness plan
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
Michelle provides?
Wellness committee, and he's a participant in the Biggest Loser from just this side right now, which is a whole initiative.
There's a list right
We can get his BMI for
The
you.
biggest loser.
Thank you for sharing here.
Thanks for running that way.
I'm kind of handicapped on that right now because of all the weight I've lost before we started this.
Oh, here goes an excuse.
Don't worry, fitness is important to him. He's already, should get a good point there, he's already lost weight.
He should.
You know, I think a lot of these that are so subjective, I think it's one of those things where if a board member is hearing from a principal, the superintendent bugs me at 11 o'clock at night and bugs me at 6 o'clock in the morning with a text message. I think it's more of, if there's a problem, you're gonna hear about it. And I don't know if there is a way to measure it other than we're trying to do some things to help everybody out. I don't, that's gonna be a hard one. But you know, if we're, one of the things that I will tell you has been a major sticking point with me and a few of our staff over my time here has been tobacco use. And I am adamant against that. And
You have tobacco-free campuses 24/7?
we do.
We were one of the first districts, if not the first, weren't we?
And, yeah, and that, those are things that are kind of things that I wear on my sleeve about well-being,
Including the football stadium?
including the football stadium.
Do your police monitor it so that even the patrons aren't smoking behind the bleachers?
Walk across the street.
Yeah.
Oh, they go across the street?
Yeah. Yeah, I've never seen anybody smoke.
But work-life
I've
balance,
heard so.
that's a tough one,
Yeah.
because it's, that's so individual with people, but I think, I think I can say without a doubt that anything that comes in front of me, I always tell them family comes first.
And it might be that maybe on these site wellness plans, that maybe they think about how can they, as a building or as a department such as the maintenance department or the transportation department, what can they do on their wellness plan to help everyone address this item? You know, because I'm thinking back, how many teachers stay late at night? Or they leave, go home, take care of their family, and then come back and work late, or go up to school on the weekend. How many administrators do that?
So what's the expectation?
I'm sorry?
What is the expectation?
Exactly, right? So you know, I don't know, I think it's a good conversation. Remember, once again, this is a growth model. So the intent is not for you all to say, oh my gosh, we've got so many things to do better. It's to really use this as where are we now and where can we grow, right? So that might be an item that is a good conversation with all of your employees. I mean, you gotta think about, it is so much more stressful now to be in education in any position, that this is a big item nationwide.
It is, that's fixing to suggest it's just a waste of time, we're just blind and walk it out. But,
Really?
then you, well, because I don't have a measure. I don't know how involved we should be worried, I don't know how much we should worry about the thing says it goes for. So perhaps it's one of them items that we keep in there, we start off as developing, and we try to develop ideas to promote a better place to work, so we have higher retention rates.
Janet just reminded me of something else that we started 4 years ago, 5 years ago. We do health screenings. We started that with Total Wellness, where we do health screenings at every site. And every year.
That's a good thing, right?
And where they come in and do, and if you've got insurance, you're not paying anything for it. And they have flu shots at the same time.
So see that, just right there where you're brainstorming, I bet there are other things happening. So it's just a matter of formalizing what you're doing, making sure all of your employees are aware, and then making sure the board's informed. It might be that maybe the well-being of the employees is an agenda item, where there's a report given, information only, on here's what we're doing as a district. Isn't it awesome to be a Guthrie Public School employee? Look at all of these things that we have, opportunities we have. And look at, it starts at the top with modeling a healthy lifestyle and encouraging you to have balance in your life, blah, 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 right? I mean, it's a great conversation starter. Right?
And that was, when we started health screening, it was a deal where I went to Dennis at the time, and I said, we need to do something for health for our employees, because this is becoming more stressful. Well, when I know how much more stressful it would get about 8-10 months after that. But, and that is really, it's one of those deals I just kind of forgot about, because we just do it.
Okay. All right, next tab, student services. So this is a different way of looking at what are you doing for kids, okay? So the first one, school environment, we've talked about that. So once again, that's pretty subjective, but, you know, there is data. When you could ask maybe for a report on what's our average daily attendance at each of the sites. I know as a superintendent, I had trouble with a principal with not only student attendance, but teacher attendance. So we ran an attendance report on both staff and students, and oh my gosh, it hit you in the face, because it was so different from every other building. And it wasn't during flu season. It was just really amazing. And I had them run me a report that showed the trend over the 4 years that principal had been there, and the attendance had declined for both students and staff. So absenteeism was on the rise. That was a pattern. So there are things you can do to see, do kids want to come to school? Do staff want to come to school? There are reports you can get. Systems of support. Now this is a phrase, you may have heard it, you may not have. This is a phrase nationwide. So I want you to think about this. What are we doing to meet the needs of all kids? Okay? This question is really tough when budgets are tight. So I'm not talking about things that are mandated on a student's IEP, but all the extra things that we like to do in our schools that are now having to be cut because budgets are tight. This also, and it kind of combines with the next one, student engagement. So what are we doing to keep kids involved in school? A good example of this, and this is where it ties into systems of support. So in Stillwater, the assistant principal at the high school had a goal to have 100% of the kids engaged in at least one extracurricular activity. There's a lot of research, you might have read the book Breaking Ranks, or Breaking Ranks 2, that says if you are not engaged in an activity at school in 9th or 10th grade, you are more likely to drop out of high school. So the goal was to get everybody 100%. Well, they found out that they had kids. What do? If you're not an athlete, you're not a musician, you don't want to belong to a club, so you're not in student council or any of the other clubs that you have in school, you're not in DECA, you're not in FFA, what do? So this assistant principal found, she's now a high school principal in a different district, she found that there were 14 kids who were in nothing. So she pulled them together and got to know these 14 kids together. What she found out, and now they had poor attendance, poor grades, not the best behavior. She found out they all liked disc golf. Frisbee golf? Okay. So they formed a disc golf club. And she used activity fund money, had t-shirts printed for them, they named their club. They would go to one of the parks that had disc golf set up. They do that twice a week. What do you think happened to those 14 kids? Everything improved, all of their stats improved, because they now had an activity that they were involved in that wasn't what most people do. But it took effort to figure out, number one, figure out who are those kids, and number two, taking the time to figure out, well, what would appeal to that group. So I say that to you as an example, and I'm using story because that's my latest life, okay? Just as a real life example of something that was done that would fit in this area, okay? So I don't know what your goal is on attendance. You talked about it earlier, but when you think about engagement in school, talking about student conduct, right? You were talking about attendance and what you have that multi-step plan to get kids to come to school. But once they're there, what's going on in the sites to keep them engaged? Something to think about. Area of growth maybe, I don't know, but it's a great conversation. And you can definitely get data on that. And then of course relationships, that's pretty subjective. But there are things I bet that your principals and counselors and teachers are doing at the sites. Maybe support groups, maybe business mentors coming in and working with kids. I bet if you had some of your staff brainstorm things that they're doing to work on this relationship piece, there would probably be a huge list, because that's what we do in school. We work on that kind of thing. Okay, so this is different. When it says student services, this is different than student achievement. This is that soft side, those soft skills, and just the relationship piece of being in school. Okay, operations. So operations, this is really clear cut. Facilities, transportation, child nutrition, technology. So I know you probably have people who oversee those areas. All four of these areas are done under one tab. So it might be that when summer's over, maybe this is one of the first things you chunk, because I don't know if these directors put a report to you at your August or September board meeting, but that's easy data on where are we on the bond projects, where are we on our building fund, and how many work orders got done this past year, how many are outstanding. You get it
The
monthly?
property committee gets that monthly, but we do an annual report to the board as well.
Okay, that's perfect. What month does that happen?
I think we did it in May.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So see, you get that, and then probably transportation and child nutrition do some kind of annual report, right?
Yeah, more I have a director of operations that is over
Okay.
transportation and maintenance, and then we have child nutrition that's really kind of separate from, as far as The leadership and the technology is separate as well, even though they are operations items. But
But do they do reports to the board?
child nutrition, I do not believe has done one. And technology has not done one, and that's more of a function of how we've been funded. Because until this last bond sale, we've not had any bond dollars for technology. So,
Wow. Okay.
we
You didn't know I had a sense of humor, did you?
Yeah, we don't have futuristic.
Yeah.
It's not even in our.
yeah, but we do get updates in committee on all this. And the property committee handles all this, actually, not necessarily child nutrition, but facilities, transportation, and technology. And specifically facilities and transportation on a monthly basis.
So see, that's an easy thing to document, right? Okay, then, and I know Gina and Travis are just gonna go nuts over this one, but the next one, personal qualities. Sorry, I just had to put that out there, because I know you two are gonna look at me and go, really? How do we document this, right? So once again, this is a highly subjective tab. But honestly, you wouldn't have hired him if you didn't believe he was a leader of integrity, right? Okay. And just his self-control on social media. I'm very serious about that. You don't see him.
It takes a lot.
Well, but you don't,
They're horrible.
you're not out there embarrassed because your superintendent has had to apologize
Right,
publicly
exactly.
for lack of self-control, right?
Right.
Public speaker, I have had a lot of boards take that out because their superintendent only speaks at graduation and the rest of the time there's nothing going on. I'm sure you want to keep that because I think he probably speaks to multiple groups.
Once or twice a year.
Especially when we're trying to pass bond
That's
issues.
right.
Exactly. Self-improvement, it might be something that, I mean, you know that he participates in groups, but maybe in his soup report to you each month, then you hear about, well, he's gone to this conference, or he's gone to COSA for this superintendent session on something, right?
I do.
Yeah, exactly. So that's easy. Professionalism, all right. This is very subjective, right? But you know, is he having a conniption over something? Is he doing the blame game and blaming Carmen and Doug, right? Instead of accepting responsibility because he is the leader,
No.
right? So, but you see where I'm going with
Yep.
that. It's subjective, but you all know. Okay. Then district goals. So there's space for 4 if you want more. Obviously, you just duplicate it. But this is a place where you could input up to 4 district goals and give them a score on how are they coming. And so you could look at all these one night. You could divide them up, spread them out, do 1 a quarter. It's whatever you all want to do. I mean, this document is meant to be as flexible as you need it to be. And that's part of the frustration with principals and their commercially produced tool, because it's not flexible, it can't be modified. And this is meant for you to use it however it fits y'all. So I know that this is a future area, so we'll keep going. Okay, then the end of the year ranking. So this is the sheet that you would get out each quarter, okay, when you're doing your 2 or 3 tabs, whatever you decide. And then all Janae is gonna do, she could write, like let's say board soup relationship. So she could just do tally marks in there of how many gave him 4s, how many gave 3s, for the overall score from each board member, to then come up with an overall rating that you had on your master sheet at that time. This is like the record, that final record, okay? So you use this sheet. You can also use this and just jot in comments if you want to jot down the positives that came out from the group as well as the suggestions for improvement. I mean, do everything on this sheet. And then at the end of the year in June, when you finalize it, this is the sheet that then he keeps. You also know that all of these sheets get picked up at the end of executive session. And that there really is only one record, and that's the one he's gonna keep. Everything else you should shred. You don't want documents floating around. Okay? Any questions? I mean, you guys have been so good about asking questions as we went through it. Anything else? Okay. Now let's just talk real
I
fast.
just want to say one thing. A lot of these things you guys talked about, subjective things, and I guarantee you every person I work with in this building would attest to this because we talk about it all the time. We wish that you guys could be in a site for a day and just stand back and watch what happens and see how things are handled. Same way here, same way probably at transportation. But I feel like, we all feel like that you would get a sense of a lot of these things that aren't able to be documented through data or whatever, just by being present and actually seeing what goes on. Say we get 12 irate parents in one day, you're gonna see how he handles those. You're gonna see how Carmen or Doug handles those, and you know, what the process is, et cetera. That's just my tidbit on that, so, and
Well, good, thank you.
I think it would be awesome if you guys could even, you know, not even the whole day. It'd be very insightful.
What do you think about that?
That's a good recommendation.
Fine with me.
I should have asked you that first, my bad.
She's surprised.
You know,
Yeah, you surprised her, Jana, in a meeting. Sorry.
Way to go. The thing that I do know about, there's a difference between a building level day and the central office day. A building level day is full of routine that is interrupted by chaos, and you don't know what the chaos is. At the administrative building, it is hurry up and wait. It's kind of like trying to fly Southwest across the country. And so the thing, there are times where it's quiet and I'm gonna sneak out, I'm gonna go to the building. And then there are times where there's people lined up outside my office door and it is just, we're slammed. And so I have no problem with if you guys want to do that. I would welcome that because you've heard me say, I stack our administrators up against anybody in the state. But there are subtle differences between a building level and the admin building. And I didn't understand that until I became a central office administrator. And I think those two folks back there would probably echo that. And you always wonder, what are they doing at the central office? And
why aren't we cutting those jobs in a budget?
yeah, and you always wonder about what's going on. And you know, I worked at the building level enough to know that when I walk in and I can tell they're having a bad day, you need any help? You want me to just get out of your way? You know, because there's routine filled with chaos there. It's less routine here and more of crisis management, and you have no idea what that crisis will be when you get here at 7:45. And so I just throw that out.
So it's supposed to scare us, or?
Yes.
Don't spend a day with me in personnel.
They're scared.
And when you spend some time with Mr. Ogle in personnel, you never know what you're gonna run into.
And the funny thing is, most of what he does, you won't be able to listen to because it's behind closed doors,
That's true.
because it might end up in here.
Mhm.
Yeah, true.
And this group is really good about that. They understand, because we've been through some of that. And so they do understand.
Yep. Interesting conversation. Okay, so I will clean this up
Okay.
and I will send it to Mike tomorrow. Now, we haven't talked about how you're going to evaluate him for the rest of this year. So, next month's February. So you have February, March, April, May, June, you have 5 months left. I would suggest that you think about what are your, you're gonna try to chunk for the rest of the year, right?
I don't think we've gotten that far as a board, we have not
Okay.
discussed that.
So if let me just, in the effort of time, just throw this out there. So you might want to think about chunking in March and chunking in June. And just think about the top 4 you have out of the 10. Pick 4 and do 2 in March and 2 in June. And then finalize this document. And then July 1, start with a new schedule for the entire year, and you'll know which pieces you're doing each quarter. So think about what you're gonna see in your packet for this semester, which items you're passionate about, because I bet each of you, if we went around the room, there would probably be one tab that you're going, yes, I'm really excited about this tab, right? So think about that, and then you all have a conversation.
Is that considered a complete evaluation document?
Because there's nothing in law that says what tool to use, how many elements, what wording has to be. We used to, as superintendents, be evaluated on the same things that teachers and principals were evaluated on, so it was visible in the classroom, keep students highly engaged in their learning. Oh, really? Yeah, no, so the legislature got rid of that a while back. So, and that will give you time to think about what you think you want to do for the rest of this year.
I think probably we should have that, Jana, as an agenda item for discussion. I don't think it requires action, but it will require discussion in February so that we can make the preparation, because we've got a pretty quick turnaround until the February board meeting, so we can make preparation for it.
And then the last thing I would suggest is to be proactive on letting everyone know that you're changing the way you evaluate. Because as you know, when people look at your agenda, if they see on there more than once, go into executive session to discuss the evaluation of our superintendent or statute, blah, 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 they're going, oh, what's wrong? It's now been on the agenda twice, right? So I encourage districts to just be proactive, notify all your staff, people that come to your board meetings, I don't know if you want to notify the media, some superintendents are, some aren't. But, okay, well, at least for your staff, say the board is now going to evaluate our superintendent a different way than in the past year. It'll now look similar to how we evaluate all teachers and administrators, so you'll see on the agenda multiple times throughout the year to go into exec to do it. It's an ongoing formative evaluation.
Should the superintendent make it, or should the board president? I think the board president should, because.
Yeah,
I think that,
yeah, that'd be good.
whatever works for you all, but I would be proactive and put that out there before it appears on.
And that way, then the principals have heard it in the meeting too, and they can bring it back to their staff too.
Discussion.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't have to be, but this needs to be an item for discussion.
Right.
She can make that, this statement. I don't know.
Does the item, the task that we want to evaluate, does that have to be a board item agenda? And it's a board agenda item?
Just for discussion, in order for the whole board to discuss it, well, I guess it could be an executive session.
Executive session,
Yeah.
that's a superintendent evaluation.
That's right. Like we've been putting it for the last couple of meetings.
And Jennifer, if you wanted to, during board member comments, you could relay this at the February board meeting.
That'd be good.
And I think that'd be fun, if you just relay that during board comments, and then we put that in executive session as a discussion in February.
For clarification, in February, executive session discussion will include what 4 items or whatever we want to evaluate Mike on for this year. Is that what I understand?
Well, that won't be the agenda
I
item.
mean, in what everybody.
The agenda item is just discussion of superintendent's
Bring to this meeting
evaluation.
is-
The agenda item will say to discuss the ongoing evaluation of our superintendent.
Right.
Right.
But in that-
meeting, the board
You can
members
do
need
it.
to bring your top 4
Yeah.
items that you want.
But you're not gonna vote, you're
No.
just
No,
going to hear what everyone is really wanting.
Reach a consensus.
yeah.
Consensus does not constitute a vote.
Yeah. And the other thing is, because I've kept you so long, you're gonna get 4 points tonight, not 3. So 2 ethics and 2 continuing ed, and then, before you go to sleep on me, would you please in your packet get out the little evaluation sheet?
For one more point, we'll do that.
Before you do that, there's one thing you forgot.
What?
I'm on my mind.
Going back
What did I forget?
to, before we took the break, and the board members were to say their one thing, and you didn't allow me.
Dr. Simpson, I apologize. Can you do it in 60 seconds?
I can do it in less than that.
Okay, go. I'm so sorry.
Work together.
Yeah,
Boom.
there you go.
Nice.
Good job.
Nice. See, and you thought I was perfect, didn't you?
No, you thought I would point it out.
No, I knew better.
We all do better than that.
And then here's the envelope, so maybe we could call for the adjournment, Madam President.
Agenda item number 6, I guess 7. Would like to,
Madam President, I move we adjourn.
Second.
roll call please.
Pearson.
Yes.
Davis.
Yes.
Watts.
Yes.
Smedley.
Yes.
Lee. Bennett Johnson.
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays.